I had been given the honor of being named Detective of the Year. They were very hard to investigate cases where somebody that can't even consent were being abused. And I got to be their voice.
Divorce is a reality for many couples, and navigating child custody can often be a tumultuous journey, especially when one party doesn't adhere to court orders. Today, we welcome Karen Widman-Frost, a retired police detective with an impressive 29-year career with the Los Angeles Police Department. Karen's story takes a unique turn as she's faced not only the challenges of divorce, but also multiple internal affairs investigations. They all stem from accusations of violating court orders regarding child custody. Now, you might be wondering, how does law enforcement agency like the LAPD handle such allegations? That's exactly what we're here to uncover today. Join us as we dive into Karen's experience, shedding light on a topic that's often overlooked and not widely discussed: how law enforcement professionals navigate the complexities of child custody, the disputes within their own ranks. So, without further ado, let's dive into Karen's illustrious career and the challenges she faced. Welcome to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Let's do this. Okay, here we are with Karen Widman-Frost.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Add the hyphen. Actually, no hyphen, but you can put it in there.
Something like a hyphen?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? We'll get into Mr. Frost, because I got to tell you, he's a beloved. Your husband is a beloved partner of mine, and we'll talk about it as we have this great conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, he's pretty special.
He is, God. He was definitely one of my best partners I had when I was, pushing the sled, if you will, back in the days. So, without further ado, let's get right to it.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, rate the importance of internal affairs in a police department and why.
So I would say that it is a 10, but only under two circumstances or parameters. And I would say that the first has to be a level of trust by the citizenry who make the complaints, and also by the officers that are subject to the complaints. So it is essentially important that both parties feel like the system is operating a way that not only respects the complaint that is made by the complaining party, but also respects the person that is being investigated. So if those two things are in play and it's done appropriately, then it's essentially important because, without having the trust of the community, then we can't do the job that we did, or I used to do, but people are still doing. So it's essentially important, but it's essentially important that it's done the right way.
I beg to ask,
Yes.
from your experience, are those circumstances set in your almost 30 plus years in your career? What would you say about that?
I was very blessed. I had a really great career, 29 years. I think I had my first personnel complaint probably at like year 17 or something. I mean, I went a really long time without getting anything. And then the first couple that I had were, beefs that were, adjudicated where I was found not guilty of everything. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until that I went through a divorce that things went off the rails, and the system as it's designed now can be manipulated and abused. And so it is the system that we have in place, but it does have some holes in it. It's
not perfect.
It is not.
And it's a big machine.
It is.
And I followed up with that questions because even I, as an IA alum myself, can tell you that those two alignments, if you will, don't always are even.
Right.
Where, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're trying to say is something along the lines like, look, let it be about the process. And let's not take things personal or have an expectation that this person, there's a pre-notion of this bias about, oh, it's just Karen. She didn't do this.
Right.
Or someone didn't like you. Oh, I can't believe Karen did. She probably did do this.
Well, there is some of that. So, the organization is run by human beings, and human beings bring all of the human characteristics with it. So there are a lot of human elements that are wrapped up in the organization and specifically internal affairs. And one of the things may be, a familiarity with the person, whether you're going to automatically assume that they're guilty or not guilty. There may be some of that. And there may be some other motivating factors, like, is the person that will be recommending the discipline on this, are they looking for promotion? Are there expectations that I need to put myself in a position to show that I'm hard on this to make myself look better for that? So there's a lot of elements that are all human based, that, it's the nature of the beast. But I think if we are realistic, in its intent, internal affairs is essentially important, but we also have to recognize that there's a lot of human motivating factors that can send things off in the wrong way.
Very well said. Even though I am an IA alum, I got to give it a 10 for the pure reasons that I truly believe something along the lines, something's going to happen. Whether you're out there doing a traffic stop, whether you're responding to a service call, whether you're applying tactics, or maybe saying something in the office that someone feels very uncomfortable. Right. So office setting, administrative setting, operations, no matter what it is that you provide this essential functions of a police officer, somewhere, somehow, something's going to go wrong.
Well, that's true.
Someone's got to investigate that.
And like I said, this is a big organization. It's run by people. And if you just look at things in a broader context, it's like a pendulum. So back, years and years and years ago when my dad came onto the job, he came on in 1969. So as a young police officer, as a young sergeant, somebody came in the door and said, I want to make a complaint, get the heck out of my station. And they had the ability to do that back then. And it was abused, and it was not the best representation of the city, and it alienated a lot of people that had legitimate complaints.
Oh, absolutely.
And unfortunately, I think the pendulum has swung really far in the opposite direction. In order to correct a problem, it is swung so far that we will take everything, whether it should be investigated as a full complaint or not. And I think once the pendulum starts to swing to the middle again, we will find some middle ground where things can be done the way that they were intended for internal affairs to be. And then we will be at that 10. But right now the pendulum swings from 1969 to 2022, 24, whatever. If it swings back to the middle ground, I think it will be operating the way as it's intended to be.
I like that. I like that answer. I couldn't agree with you more. Finish this sentence for me. As an internal affairs investigator, my job is to
find the facts.
Okay.
Only.
You think it happens? I shouldn't say you think it happens. Is there more than that when you're an IA investigator, from your experience? Or from what you heard?
I mean, again, it's a human organization run by humans. I think that there's a lot of, other factors that are involved in it. I think there are very few people within the organization that have a malintent to, try and crush somebody. I mean, there are the old expressions, to get to the top, you burn a cop. There are some of that, but I think that there are just a lot of other motivating factors. And so I don't think anybody intentionally goes in to try and, screw somebody, but there are other factors involved. So sometimes it's not just to get to the facts. Sometimes it's just a broader perspective of things, or maybe just not understanding what the systems are in place to do and what other systems are available.
Right. Or it's not even alleged misconduct.
Right.
For that matter. I believe, I know you were a detective, but it's somewhere you were a sergeant.
I was.
Okay. I'm sure you did an intake, or you had to do an intake.
I have.
And I'm sure somewhere in there you're thinking to yourself, well, I mean, you're sharp. I've known you for years, but did anybody kind of like walk you through this process? Because you know how it is. Not many people even like to do this kind of stuff.
So this was one of, I don't know, maybe things are better now. I'm not sure. I promoted to sergeant in 2005. And I remember going to supervisor school. At the time, they were running sworn and civilian through at the same time.
Okay.
And it was up at the old academy. It was a month of my life. And I like to say that it was like this month-long exercise in esoteric, leadership principles. And I learned very, very little about the actual physical process of doing a pursuit. I learned very little about the physical process of taking a complaint. They gave us some exemplars, but we watched lots of movies on these leadership principles, and it gave me very little to work on, so that when my number came up and I went out into the field, I went to a division that I ended up loving very much. But when I first got there as a brand new sergeant, I was a young sergeant. I think I had 13 years on at the time or something like that. And they found 1979 to be a really good year and decided, we don't need to leave it. We're just going to stay right here. So I walk in like, really, I don't know why you're here, but I was not treated warmly upon my arrival. And so there was no mentoring. There was no training. There was no partner to kind of walk me through it. Here's your keys. There you go. Sink or swim. And I remember calling my dad from morning watch in the middle of the night doing, Dad, I think I made a mistake. Because I came from a job that I really, really liked to this one. And he said, just be patient, hold on. It ended up being fine. But the first 6 weeks were absolutely miserable. Nobody would talk to me. It was not an easy transition from being a SLO to a sergeant. Oof. So eventually I got it and figured it out. But yeah, the process back then was not a smooth process. There was no mentoring. There was no guidance. And leaving supervisor school was just like, here are some principles of leadership, be a leader, but nothing on how to do an intake at all.
A month that we can't take back from our lives. Exactly.
Saw some good movies, but
yes.
Yeah, that was about it.
A lot of lecturing. And,
yeah, exactly.
Nowadays probably texting on social media or whatever, but I don't recall. Wasn't there like a ride along? Didn't you do like 2 or 3 days of a ride along? I think we did back in like 06, 07. There was like 3 days where they say, hey, go hang out.
You know what we did? We did
go hang out with the sergeant and.
Right. So they sent us, I think it was 2 days.
Yeah, something like that.
And we rode along with the sergeant. There was 2 of us in the car with them. I think I went to Devonshire or something. I didn't get to do a whole lot. But again, it would have been, looking back on it in retrospect, yes. As somebody that has been through it and as a person that went through it. So as a detective and a detective supervisor, I took every opportunity for, especially the young women coming on, just because I had a soft place for it. And they were coming in, I'm like, let me show you how to do this. Let me give you some exemplars. Let me walk you through the process. Let me hold your hand with this for the first few weeks, because the experience that I had was so isolating that I didn't want anybody else to have to go through it. Right. It was really, it was not a good experience, but it, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Amen to that. Talking about a trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
1094, right?
Yep, 10A94. There was 2 10 classes. I was the A class.
Right, and then you made it to Pacific probation.
Yeah, I was
beach, boardwalk, Venice.
So yeah,
what was Venice like?
So
back then,
I worked Pacific Division, and at that time, it was the last division to come up onto the 312. So this is the original pilot program of 312. Pacific came up onto that plan, and when I made probation, I was supposed to leave, and they couldn't get anybody to fill the beach detail because it was still an 8-hour shift. No P2 in the city wanted to work the beach detail that year because it wasn't a 312.
Right.
So they wheeled me to the beach detail. So that was my wheel. So I spent April through October on the beach detail. It was a lot of fun. One of the best times I ever had, wearing shorts and a T-shirt and riding bikes on the beach. It was amazing. And then from there, I officially wheeled after the end of the summer to Van Nuys Division.
To the 09.
Yep.
That's right.
My first of 3 times there.
Yes, we'll talk about that. For the purposes of who's watching and listening, the wheel is when you transfer. So traditionally in the LAPD, after a 1-year probationary period, they say, hey, you got to go somewhere else. And,
Exactly.
And they give you a choice, but you never get that choice.
Yeah, I was supposed to go to Newton, Rampart, or 77th, and Van Nuys, right? I did a year and a day, and then found my way down to Wilshire Division. I chased the 312 until they canceled it.
Yes, and the 312 is 3 days a week, 12 hours. You know what?
Exactly.
I remember that was like hitting like the lottery.
It was great.
Because everybody's saying, oh my God, I can work just 3 days. But what we didn't realize is it's a long 3 days.
No, it's 3 days of your life, not 5 days out of your week. So I was young, didn't have kids at the time. And so, it was fun. You spent 3 days of your life working and then going to sleep and then going back to work. And I loved it. It was fine. And then they canceled it.
The beach detail, Venice. I'm also a proud Pacific Division alum. That's where I did my probationary period as a sergeant. And you know what? My daughter was born. She must have been like, I think 3, 4, maybe 5 years old. She was born in 04, and I was there in 08. So she was like 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
And you know what? What really scared me the most is I had a couple of situations at the beach where they lost their child.
Oh, yeah.
And
Lost kids at the beach. I know.
That hits so hard to know that your child is just... And the reason why, what makes it even worse is because Venice on a Saturday and Sunday, you can agree, this is just completely packed.
Yes. Well, I don't know if when you were there, when I was there on Saturday was family day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of families came from everywhere. Sunday was gangster day. Yeah. And so all of the gangs from all over the city would make the trek to the boardwalk at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And you could just see them all coming in. And the energy on the beach was electric, just because you could just feel the hostility between these rival gangs that were on, and these fights just popping off everywhere. And almost every Sunday we ended up having to shut the thing down just because fights after fights and shootings. It was a mess that summer.
It was bananas.
Yes, it was bananas.
Didn't they have the drum circle?
The drum circle was
there. The drum circle
yeah.
on Sundays in Dockweiler Beach is where they all
This is
hung
when
out.
it was still were you there when they built the new substation down there, or was it still the old one? So the old one with and then Rosetto, she was the transient that lived down there.
Yes.
And she was great. And she called us all her kids and
Boston.
Yes. So that the substation was an old condemned building that they let police officers work out of. Yeah. Fun memories. It was a long time ago.
You were kind enough to text me this trip down memory lane. Let's see here. Van Nuys. Then, hold on a second. Then we end up at Wilshire. What's going on with that?
Well, like I said, I didn't want to go to Van Nuys, so I did a year and a day, and then I transferred to Wilshire because I wanted to be, at least where, I think I put in transfer to go to Wilshire, 77th and Newton or something like that, and Wilshire took me first, and I chased the 312 because Wilshire had the 312 too, and I stayed there until the 312 was canceled. Yeah. And then I was a disgruntled P2. And you'll see on the list there, the next thing I did is, you know what? You're going to take this hard chart. You're going to cancel the 312. Guess what? I'm going to DARE.
That's
right. And I became a DARE officer.
3 years DARE.
I did.
What was that like?
It was fascinating. I only worked a year in the classroom with the kids. But some folks there thought I had some really good instructional abilities, so I became part of their training cadre. And so I went to Okinawa, Japan on a training cadre for 3 weeks. That was fun.
Yeah.
I went to Canada. I did a training seminar in Nashville, Tennessee for a big seminar. So I got to travel. I got to meet some people. I really got to develop my instructional skills. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. The time in the classroom was very short.
Right.
But working as an instructor, working with other adults, I enjoyed that very much.
Relationships and fostering them must have been so rewarding.
It was fun. It was something different. And again, it's just before my kids were born. So I got to travel and do some fun things, and I really enjoyed it. So
Senior lead.
I was. And
You were that community. Hey, there's something wrong with my neighborhood. Neighborhood watches,
Yes.
all this stuff in West. So you came back to the 818. You just
I did. I mean, it was interesting because that was the neighborhood that I grew up in. So West Valley at the time was all of West Valley. It was before the Topanga area. So I was raised in West Valley.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
so to come back, and my grandparents were there, my best friends were there. I mean, that's where
So you're
I
Valley.
grew up.
You're Valley all the way.
Totally.
Oh,
For
like
sure,
me.
for sure, a Valley girl, right? And so I went back to West Valley, and it was the weirdest thing. It was the first time I dropped into a division in my first day there, and I knew instantly exactly where I was. I wasn't lost at all. It was
Right.
just surreal to be dropped into a division on my first night and know exactly where I was around me. And it was fun, being a SLO. It was probably the hardest job to do if you're going to do it right. So rewarding. I mean, if you're going to do it right, it was a really rewarding job. And I put my whole heart into it for like almost 5 years. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such demand to take care of your own neighborhood.
Right,
And I'm
well-
sure all these quality of life issues are so important. And people don't really realize
It's
how
more
much
than
work.
the quality of life issues too. I mean, there was, it was tweaker pads that, coppers were citing, drug dealings and stuff coming in and out of there. But I learned that we can't enforce our way out of this problem. This house is going to continue to exist, or this dive motel where all the parolees were landing. So I just used all of the other resources that I had available. Oh, so we're going to get the Department of Building and Safety there, and we're going to do compliance checks. Oh, we have dogs that are unlicensed, so we're going to get animal reg there. Oh, you have a pool with all kinds of green stuff in the backyard. We're going to get vector control. And so you just cite them into submission, squeeze them like a pimple, and they're finally like, enough, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And so a problem location that you can get the owner or the business or whatever to say, I don't need to deal with this anymore, and leave the location and turn it over to a legitimate business or a legitimate homeowners or renters or whatever. And the rest of the entire neighborhood is so thankful to have their business or their street or their neighborhood back. It's really, really rewarding, but it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. Congratulations, you made sergeant and went to Northeast.
Northeast.
Okay, so let me stop you right there, because I'm all 818s. I grew up in the Valley ever since I came from Peru in 1980, so I'm giving away a lot of my age. However, when I went to I did my probation in Foothill Division, I remember Arleta because that's one of the houses that my mom and my stepfather lived. But I had no clue where the Rock was. I didn't even know Foothill was off to 210. 64.5 square miles.
Huge division, right?
And I wasn't too familiar with that area, but I bring all this up to say that I know that in Northeast, you being from the Valley, you must have just thought to yourself, where am I?
Seriously, yeah, I'm a Valley girl that grew up. I knew where Dodger Stadium was, and
But
that
that's
was
it.
basically it. Oh, and I knew where the Academy was.
Sunset.
Were my, right, and that was pretty much it. I spent the first couple months totally lost. This is before we had phones with GPS in them. This is when we were still opening up the maps in the little in our car with our flashlights, trying to figure out, street guides, trying to get to point A to point B. I was lost for months.
And you're like, is this north and south, really? Are you
and
serious?
It's not. The division goes all over the place. I remember one time trying to get to a radio call. I'll get into the weeds a little bit.
Yes,
but
please.
So there are avenues in Northeast Division.
Correct.
And the avenues, are avenue,
42,
55,
55,
6,
61, yeah.
And I came to learn that the 4-digit numbers were off of York. York
Okay.
is a 4-letter word. And then the 3-digit numbers, so if it's Avenue 55, so it's a 3-digit number on Avenue 55, it's going to be close to Fig because it's a 3-digit number. If it's a 4-digit number and it's Avenue 55, it's going to be closer to York. So that's what I learned. But some of the streets don't go through, so you have to go here and there. And I remember trying to get to, it was it was a supervisor request for, you know, a 72-hour hold, and I just needed to ask the 3 questions before they transported them to the hospital. And I remember getting so lost, I ended up pulling over and asking some guy that was washing his car. And I'm looking at the map, I'm like, how do I get here? And he said, oh, what you need to do is you need to go to this street and here and around. I had to ask some guy washing his car how to get to the location because I was so turned around and lost, and it wasn't showing up on the map. It was just, and this is before, you know, Garmin GPS or GPS into our phones.
Yeah.
It was an adventure.
The maps.
Yes,
of
for
course.
sure.
And then we go, you know what, if you can tell us what RACER stands for. I know what DOC stands for, the Department of Operations Center, but I know it's something, I know it's critical response.
Yeah. It's
real analysis?
I don't know.
Real something, critical response.
Critical response. It was the DOC. I don't know. We just called it RACER.
Yeah.
It was the Department Operations Center. Somebody
what was
came
that
in.
like?
It was really informative. What I learned from that division more than anything else is that I never wanted to promote higher than lieutenant. If I ever got to that level, I knew I never wanted to make captain. So at the DOC, this is the Department Operations Center, so you're getting information real time about you know, critical incidents that are happening all over the city, and then you relay them onto the command staff, you know, in the middle of the night so they know what's going on. And the way this organization treats probationary captains, it's worse than phase 3 P2 or P1. It's just really bad. I was like, I never want that. It was awful how they treat the brand new captains. Just awful.
Yeah.
That was a good learning experience, but I was there. I was there for the first May Day thing. I was in the operations center when that whole May Day fiasco and Rampart went down.
Right.
So it was informative. It was hit or miss. Like, it was either 100 miles an hour with your hair on fire or really, really slow. So it was a great opportunity when it was slow to study. And I studied because I decided I had young kids at that point already, had 2. And I decided that a detective schedule was going to be more conducive to being a mom.
So talk to me. You made detective. Congratulations. You made detective?
I did. So I gave up my sergeant stripes and just went to D1. And so left a supervisory position to be a detective, and it was really interesting because I'd never worked on the other side. You know, as uniforms, we, you know, catch them and clean them and put the handcuffs on them, put them in the, you know, the booking stall, and I'll see you in court, right?
Right.
It was really interesting to see everything that happened on the other side of it, and that I wasn't really aware of, and then I became acutely aware of that all the work that needs to be done in really the next 48 hours sometimes in order to get it ready for court, for arraignment, filing with the DA's office. And then some of the cases, you know, it's just that whole cops and robbers things of, you know, getting just a tiny little clue and being able to build on it and finding your bad guy. It's very rewarding.
Wow. And how long did you do that? And I know at some point you made a supervisory detective. You made a role as a D2?
Yeah. So I made detective in 2007. I stayed within it. I did a whole bunch of stuff within that rank. I worked gangs and robbery and...
You went to major crimes.
I did a loan there. That was fun. But I have found in the couple times that I've gone into the building, when I'm there, I like the people in the building. I think that there's some really great talent there. But I found that I am just not building material. I'm geographic street cop material. Yeah. And great people there. I just wasn't a good fit. So the couple times that I tried it on, it was like a shoe that didn't fit right, and I put myself right back into a geographic area because it suited me better. And I went back to working sex crimes. I feel like that is my subject matter expertise. I spent most of my time in detectives, did a whole bunch of stuff, but sex crimes is where I spent most of my time and where most of my passion was.
That's in Van Nuys when you called it quits.
Yeah, I ended up, I had a really, really big case, a serial rape case. It should have gone to RHD. it didn't. I ended up keeping it myself. It ended up being ultimately altogether, there was like 26 victims altogether on a pseudo celebrity case. It was massive.
Wow.
And it was, basically just me on this thing. And I said, I'm going to see this thing through until I get to retirement. Once that case got close to completion, I said, I need a minute. And so I ended up leaving sex, and then I actually finished off my career on robbery. So my last cases were robbery cases. Those are just fun. I mean, just fun. Sex crime cases are super rewarding, but they're emotionally exhausting.
Oh, no.
The robbery cases are just, for the most part, unless somebody really gets hurt, most of the time it's just fun, cops and robbers.
Lots of great assignments. Thank you for sharing all that with me. And somewhere in all these assignments, which is our next segment, is some child custody issues.
Yes.
With a chronic complainer, which we've had conversations, and I appreciate you coming to the show to share your story, because I'm total in agreement with you that there are certain events, if you will, that happen off duty.
Right.
That has absolutely nothing to do with the department. I can tell you just from experience alone, when I, as a advocate, as a prosecutor, as really what it really is, to put on this hearing, and it had to do with off-duty incidents, whether it was domestic violence or things that are happening in the house, right? More so, things that are happening in the bedroom, that no one really wants to really hear or pass judgment or, give some scrutiny, whether it's good or bad. And then you wonder, or I suppose the challenge is, okay, this all happened, but how is that related to performance? And so I'm going to leave the floor up to you, because I know that there is this IA story that involved you with some custody issues, and you don't mind sharing. Tell me what happened.
So, again, I think IA is exceptionally important. Again, that pendulum swing, we went from, leave my station, get out of here, I'm not going to talk to you, to taking everything. And I think we need to get to the place where we're someplace in between. And I have seen situations with, crimes that happen between domestic partners or married couples. Those certainly need to be investigated completely. But if we're talking about a situation that doesn't elevate to the level of a crime, but it's just a tool that somebody can use against somebody else. So I like to, before I tell my story, I'd like to liken it to, let's say you get into a neighbor dispute. And then you and the neighbor are having a dispute over, I don't know, like a fence line or something like that.
Imaginary line.
Yeah, an imaginary line, and there's a fence, and somebody, bumps into the fence or breaks the fence or something to that degree. And, there's a disagreement, and one of the neighbors, calls internal affairs because the other neighbor happens to be a police officer. This has nothing to do with the course and scope of this person's duty. And if there is some property damage, the appropriate venue would be to say, okay, I'll take a complaint. I'll look at this. As long as this is all it is, I'm going to refer you to go to small claims court, and you can adjudicate out, your dispute over who owes who for a broken fence or something to that degree. Because there's an appropriate venue to deal with that kind of dispute, because it doesn't escalate to the level of a crime or serious misconduct, and it doesn't have anything to do with the course and scope of that person's duty. So when there is a situation where there is an appropriate venue, then the department needs to look at it in those contexts and say, okay, we're going to do an intake. We're going to take this respectfully. We're going to give it a number. We're going to look at it. And if it's nothing more than this, we're going to refer you on to the appropriate venue.
Yes.
That's my personal estimation on what should happen.
Yeah.
That's not what happened.
No.
So in my situation, I am very happily married now to Brian, your old partner, who's, again, the best man that I know. He's just an awesome human being.
Because he's
before that,
because he's a Capricorn.
He is a Capricorn.
So go ahead.
Yeah, he is a Capricorn.
Go ahead.
But before that, I was married to somebody that was not on the job. And it was a egregious, ugly, messy divorce. And he found out from the very beginning, like so many other people going through divorces where somebody is on the job and somebody is not, that internal affairs can be a very effective tool to inflicting pain and emotional distress and harm on the other party. So he used it multiple times. This last time in particular, it was over an existing court order. And, without getting too into the weeds, basically what happened is that Mother's Day happened to fall on his custodial weekend. And I said, do you want me to get the kids on Saturday night or Sunday morning for Mother's Day? And he wrote back, I have plans. And I was like, oh, heck no, you're not keeping my boys on Mother's Day. That's just nonsense, right? So rather than giving them to him for his custodial weekend, I kept them. Right. And we had a fabulous Mother's Day weekend, and he was mad and incensed that I kept them on Mother's Day. And I offered to trade weekends, but no, he just pitched a fit and called internal affairs and made a complaint against me for violation of court order. Okay, so, you can take a complaint for anything, and in my estimation, what should have been done is that they should have looked at this and said, is there an existing court order? Yes. Is there a venue? It's Department 83 in Central Court downtown. Okay, this is your court, this is your internal affairs number, but we're making a recommendation that you file, an ex parte hearing or something to the effect of going back to the appropriate venue to mitigate this alleged offense. But instead, the department ended up making themselves a party in my divorce and decided to investigate this fully, and took 11 months investigating this, and did a sit-down interview with him and allowed him to just vent on all kinds of other things. He ended up making, I think, 7 additional allegations because they just gave him a floor to say all kinds of things. So it went through the process of being investigated, and they came back with a recommended suspension of 10 days. And this is right after my kid had just been discharged from the hospital. We had been in, the hospital at Children's Hospital in ICU for 3 weeks. I'm home with him, but the statute is running out, so they got to come to my house and serve me at my dining room table and tell me, here's 10 days. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to fight this. And oh, by the way, I'm not coming back. I'm going to retire because you people are crazy. This is nonsense. So I wrote my Skelly. And I fell on the sword because I did something wrong, and I totally acknowledge that I did something wrong. And one of the only thing that I acknowledged that I did wrong was during my divorce, or time with my ex, is that he had his driver's license suspended. So prior to child custody exchange, I ran his CalOp, or his driver's license, to verify whether his driver's license was valid before I turned the kids over to him. And I shouldn't have done that. It's an improper use of department resources. And so I wrote in my Skelly, I'm like, all of this is nonsense, should never have been taken, but this one, I'll take it. I'll take the hit. I should never have done that, and I'm sorry. And it was an inappropriate use, and I mea culpa. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it, but this is why I did it, but it's still my bad. Right. So it went up to Bureau. They knocked it down to 5, and I said, okay.
5-day suspension?
5-day suspension. Got up to the chief of police, and he says, no, he made it official reprimand, 0 days.
Paper penalty.
Paper penalty only, as it should have been. But, the allegations of, he had no idea that I ran him. He just was throwing mud up against the wall. So they checked and said, yep, actually she did. But he, conducting this interview with my ex, he was just making all kinds of absurd allegations.
Totally.
And, if they had just sent him on his merry way to family court, it never would have been investigated.
Done, because I got questions.
Okay.
So let me ask you this. To this very day, is there any policy regarding court orders or custody orders with the department?
So the department will just take anything. So if somebody makes a complaint that is some sort of, complaint, they will take that. There is no policy in place that says if there is another venue that should be handling it, we're going to redirect them to the appropriate venue. So as it stands now, if it's a child custody matter or any other kind of custody dispute, the department's going to continue taking these complaints rather than refer them onto the appropriate venue to have it handled appropriately.
Because to me, that seems a takeaway. That's the lessons learned.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if anybody's listening to this, if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, listen, I want to make a complaint against this child custody. Is there an existing court order?" "Yes, this is it." "Okay, go back to family court, bring it before a judge, and have it resolved."
I'm buying that one. I'm buying it because.
Don't we? Okay, let me just ask. In our 29 years, 25 years of experience as police officers, when we're pushing a black and white and people come to us with custody disputes all of the time. You get a call, he's not returning the kid, we're not going to take the kid from mom's arms, we just look at the child custody order and say, okay, you have an order that's in place. We can't rip the kid from mom or dad. Go back to court and get, a resolution in family court on this. We don't overly investigate this. We refer them onto family court for people in the fields. We don't, unless it's an abduction where we don't know where the kid is.
Correct.
That's a difference because that's a crime. But if it's just a dispute between she should have returned them earlier, we'll take a crime report, but we don't investigate those. We send them on to family court. And we can do the same thing with internal affairs. Take a face sheet and then send them on to family court. Why would the department treat me differently than we treat anybody in the field?
Yeah, and I'm not even thinking about a face sheet. This is my famous line of saying everybody works in silos. My understanding is he went to internal affairs. Is that correct?
He called the hotline.
He called the hotline.
Right.
And, well, I got to take it. Oh, my God, this sounds like it's misconduct. Well, you might want to do some research. And I say that with some experience to know, and as you're telling me the story, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? If I was a field sergeant right now in LAPD or working internal affairs, I don't think I'm very quick to cut a face sheet. I say that because of those particular reasons. Look, it's not a neglect of duty. Because it's not duty. It's not within course and scope.
It's not conduct unbecoming.
It's not unbecoming conduct because there's no reflection that's so negative on you or the department or the community.
Right.
It's not a criminal offense because it's a civil matter.
Right.
And it's not a violation of department policy and procedure because I'm willing to bet if I go through the whole manual, we're not going to find what is the proper process or way of dealing with custody orders. So I'm gonna call bullshit on that.
I would be willing to err on the side of caution and say, go ahead and cut a face sheet.
Okay.
Show me the court order. Look at the court order. Yes, there is an existing court order. There is a presiding judge on this. Okay. Then we're going to close this out and refer you on that this is not a police matter. I mean, we do that for other things.
That's right.
So, give the person that's making the complaint the opportunity to make the complaint, give them a face sheet number, spend a couple days looking through. Yep, there is a legitimate court order on file. Okay, I'm going to suggest that you go back to Department 83 and get this resolved before judge whatever. That's the appropriate way to handle it rather than the department making themselves a party to my divorce and my child custody because they inserted themselves into a situation that they had nothing to do with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes to your point about cutting a face sheet. Okay, I'm with you on that.
Right.
Only because one of the topics that we talk about when I teach at a Savage Training Group in our internal affairs course is re-victimization. So you're right. Even though you know your ex-husband, you know what he's like, but if he's making this complaint with all these emotions like, I can't believe she's doing it to me, and making stuff up, whatever, embellishing, that's not for us to pass judgment. But we certainly don't want to tell them, well, you know what, go pound sand, because it almost makes you feel like you really don't care about his thinking or his matter.
This wasn't an isolated incident. He had made probably a half dozen other complaints before this. So this is not the first time he'd ever made a complaint. He made a whole bunch of ones before that too that, I was found not guilty of.
So what's your record?
There was a pattern.
Are you 8-0? 8-1?
I think I was like 6-1 or something. I don't even know. But the fact of the matter is that, if you look at him within the system, and he didn't just make complaints against me, he made complaints against my brother. He made complaints against other coworkers that were, partners and friends of mine. So if you look in the system, he was a chronic complainer. So let's just look at the factual evidence of, the conduct of behavior here. And why are we, elevating this into the crime of the century when it's a civil matter that should be handled in family court?
Face sheet, close it out as non-disciplinary actions did not rise to the level of misconduct.
I would suggest.
Sounds so simple, but yet it is just so difficult with our big machine. We can both agree it's got holes. It's not perfect.
It is not. And it's run by people, and people have a bunch of different motivating factors. I don't clearly understand all the motivating factors that happened in this one because I had been given the honor of being named Detective of the Year, and then a couple months later, here you go with a 10-day suspension. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
It didn't really make sense to me that, you can't look at this for what it is. The thing that I did wrong, I'll take full responsibility. If they were going to split the difference and give me a penalty for something that I legitimately did wrong, I was willing to fall on my sword on that. But to hold me accountable for a child custody dispute and penalize me with discipline on that, I was going to stand my ground. That was a hill that I was going to die on, and I wasn't going to back down on that one.
Would you agree that the punishment's not the penalty? For the most part, we get it right. I guess in your case, there was some accountability, and they got it right.
At the end.
Would you agree? Sorry to interject. Would you agree that and it sticks by me because he said it's so perfect, and it's one of our guests, Jimmy Zurich. The punishment's not the penalty. The punishment is the process.
Yeah, I would say that's, for a lot of people, that's true. I know with Brian, and you can bring him on, he can talk about his situation. He was, a P3 training officer in the middle of the night. Nobody wants to be a training officer on morning watch in the middle of the night on a 3. Nobody wants that job. He was willing to do it. He was doing it well. Somebody made a complaint after they got fired, and he got put in the penalty box for a year. And that is the punishment. And it's not the punishment of Brian, because he ended up being fine and he's got a great job.
Absolutely.
The department's loss. Because they lost, years and years of experience and an amazing training officer. It's the department that loses when they put people in a situation where they're like, I just can't work like this anymore, because they take all the wind out of somebody's sails when you put them in the penalty box.
And I would imagine those 11 months weren't, and that's what I really mean about the process is the punishment. I mean, for you, again, you talked about, what's going on with your kids. You were at the hospital. You made Detective of the Year, and congratulations. We're also going to give you a 10-day suspension. So I say that and it didn't really hit home until Jimmy Z actually said that. And ever since then, every time I drive here to do an episode, I always think to myself, you know what? Penalty, for the most part, it's righteous. I mean, we get it wrong sometimes. But it's the process that's really the punishment.
The process is...
it can be better.
It can be better, and it's far too long. I know that the system is overwhelmed, but if they did a better job of triaging these things, this should go to a different venue. This should be resolved as normal. This, do a better job of triaging it. You would eliminate a lot of your work, and then you can actually process the cases that you have that are legitimate cases faster, rather than leaving people on ice for 11 months and 20 days and then, rushing to get it served under the statute, because that's a really hard part is, keeping people on ice for a year like that.
That's right. Don't forget the human factor.
Yeah,
We're always dealing with that. Okay. Let's go to best and worst, the next segment. So give me something worse. I'm not a big fan of this, but, I do know the audience needs to, I shouldn't say they need to, but it's always good to know what we really go through.
Yeah. I really enjoyed my time as a detective, as a sexual assault investigator, but it was very taxing emotionally. And I'm a person of deep faith. I think God puts me in certain situations for certain reasons. I have a son that is developmentally disabled. He has Down syndrome and autism. And somehow the universe, God in particular, put several victims of sexual abuse that were developmentally disabled in my path where I was the investigator. And they were very hard to investigate cases where somebody that can't even consent were being abused. And I got to be their voice. I got to fight for them. So it was very rewarding, but the process itself, takes an emotional toll as you're going through it. So those were difficult to just hold those families together and be there for them through the court process, the investigation, the arrest, the court process. Those were really hard, but also rewarding, but it did leave a mark.
No, absolutely. I'm big in faith myself. Look, I always say God does his best work through people.
Yeah.
We're so instrumental to test your strength, whether it's good or bad.
Right, for sure.
I'm with you on that. Okay, let's go with Bat. You got to give me something good. I know there's something.
There's a lot of good stuff.
What do you think? One that really sticks out.
Okay, so there's so many good things. Like a 29-year career, my dad used to say, "All this fun and a paycheck too." I mean, it was great. I think just maybe one of my happiest moments was maybe my graduation from the academy. My dad was there. My brother was the class ahead of me. We were a class apart. So he was the 9 class. I was the 10 class. So he, came to my graduation, the 3 of us there for the very first time, all 3 of us in uniform. It was wonderful. And then I remember when I wheeled to Van Nuys Division, my brother had wheeled to Devonshire. My dad was still working West Valley. We're all working morning watch. And periodically, we would meet at a little restaurant called El Indio. It was right on Roscoe and Balboa. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
That little taco stand there.
Yes.
And so we would go at like 3:00 in the morning, and so all 3 of us would meet there for a midnight snack in the middle of the night when the radio all calmed down. And so the 3 of us would meet for a meal, sharing a carne asada burrito at El Indio at 3:00 in the morning. That was a really good memory. Like, I have so many good memories, but those ones are just irreplaceable.
There also is an El Indio on Tampa and Roscoe. We're the same and delicious to this very, very day. As we are getting ready to close this episode, I would say your best is marrying such. How do I build this foundation? I get to Van Nuys Division and I see this tall. He looks like the Marble Man. He had this mustache and he looked so mean. I mean, just this really
6'5"
6'5" figure, and I thought he looked like some Aryan Brotherhood. Sons of Anarchy is what I thought. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's just so mean.
Right.
Or he looks so mean, right? Perfect example of looks can be deceiving, because he is the sweetest teddy bear that I got to know very, very well. And God, I had such good times with Brian when we worked Van Nuys Division. Taught me a lot, and we clicked. We had so much fun. There is nothing better in this job for all you listening out there that are trying to come on to this profession, to be in a black and white inside a car and just share those stories. Like the movie End to Watch, there's a specific scene where you're having these conversations. And I got to tell you, that is just priceless. And Brian, your husband, is just a really good dear friend of mine. So I would consider that to be your best.
Well, I knew Brian before I came on the job.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So he and my brother were best friends. They were both, they worked at Topanga Mall as security guards before they came on the job.
So did I.
And he was, became the director of security. But back in, I think I met him for the first time in ended 92, 93.
Wow.
So, yeah, probably about then. And he was my brother's best friend. And, he would bring my brother's drunk butt home after they were out having fun. And so he was just my brother's best friend.
Yes.
And he was always on the periphery. He was just always a friend.
Yeah.
And then when the universe decided it was time, it was right. And he is I tell him this all the time, so this won't be a surprise. But he is, without a doubt, the best man I've ever met in my entire life. He is just a really good human, and I'm so blessed that he picked me.
That's right. I would vouch for that 100%. Look, we're getting ready to close this episode. I'll leave the floor to you for anything that you can tell anyone who's coming on the job. You never know who's listening or watching. It can be a young sergeant, a young officer trying to make senior lead, or a senior lead promoting the sergeant, or a sergeant making detective, making lieutenant. What kind of advice do you have for anybody that's coming on the job?
What I usually tell people that ask me that question is that if you feel called to this profession, you can't ignore that call. If you think that this job is, good for its benefits, it's good because you get great vacation, you get to work the 312, maybe it's not for you. But if there's this calling that says this is what you were made to do, you can't ignore that call. You have to do it. And I can't imagine ever having done anything else. I'm really glad I'm retired now, and I'm glad that it's in the rear view. But it really was the best job ever, being able to help people, being able to give people a voice when they couldn't have a voice for themselves. I mean, it's very, very rewarding, but it's also emotionally taxing. So if you feel called into this job, that this is what you were put on this planet to do, don't ignore that voice, because it's calling you for a reason, and buckle in and hold on. It's quite a ride, but it's a really great ride, and enjoy every second of it. And just be the best person that you can be if you're hearing that call. If you're just thinking about it for, any other reason, then maybe think of something else.
And only a few chosen got to work Dodger Stadium like we did.
I know.
Where we had such great times.
It was a good time.
And what are we doing now? Tell us. I know you're retired. Congratulations. I know it's a good life. I think we talked before we came on that
retirement is quite good.
Waking up and on your own terms is
I still got the kids at home. One of them is disabled, so I'm a full-time mom. He got sick, so I ended up retiring a little bit earlier than I anticipated. I don't regret it. I'm glad I'm home. A couple years ago, when my kids were locked out of school, I'd never been political before in my life, and I'm still not overly political. I'm not partisan political. I kind of lead conservative, but I'm not overly radical in any way, shape, or form. But when my kids were locked out of school for 2 years, I started going to school board meetings and saying, hey, when are you going to open back up and send my kid back to school? And I was alarmed and kind of shocked about what I learned about the way schools operate, the way local government operates. I mean, I always voted for president and senator, but I really came to learn that school board races, city council races, especially in smaller communities, these are the races that are really important, that really affect what your life is like in your community. So I got really involved, and then in retirement, I launched the Los Angeles County for Moms for Liberty. So I am the chapter chair of the Los Angeles County chapter. It's kind of funny because we are just moms and dads and grandparents that are fighting for our kids' education. It's absolutely alarming. Such a huge percentage of our kids are illiterate. They can't read. They are performing consistently below standards. We keep pouring more and more money into our school system, and they keep performing the performance it's just it's disastrous, and kids are graduating out of the school system and they're functionally illiterate, and that's not acceptable, because you can't succeed in life if you can't read and you can't do basic math.
Yeah.
And so I became alarmed, so I started this chapter, and so we're standing up and fighting for our kids in our schools, trying to reclaim literacy and mathematical aptitude, trying to get some civility back in the classrooms, trying to make sure that the instructional materials that they're presenting are age appropriate. People like to call Moms for Liberty, radical extremists. We are most certainly not. We're just moms and dads and grandparents that are fighting really hard to get the train back on the tracks, because it is off the rails right now. And so I'm doing that. I'm a consultant with Titan National, doing expert witnessing on cases, working for the Seroptimists, and I'm volunteering and mentoring young teenage girls in high schools. So in retirement, when the time comes and it's ready, it's very, very rewarding.
Yes.
The one thing I will tell anybody that's getting close to retirement is that find your purpose outside of the job before you retire. There are lots and lots of things that give you that same sense of fulfillment outside of the organization, but find those things and do those things. Don't just sit, in an armchair, drinking a beer at 3:00 in the afternoon. Find something that gives you that purpose outside of the organization, and it makes retirement really, really fulfilling.
Gosh, thank you. You are doing such great work. You're such a good person. I've always had fun working with you, and thank you for coming.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Yeah, it's been fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And on that note, we're going to conclude this interview. And like always, please be safe out there, and don't forget to go Code 6.